partnerships team here at DBT Labs. And I'm really excited for this session today about how to build a data-driven roadmap. It's something that's I found very, very hard to do, so I'm looking forward to the pointers. And our speaker today will be Esmeralda Martinez. And if you haven't figured out by now, all these questions will be through Slack. And so if you use the Slack channel, coalesce how to build a data-driven roadmap. So without further ado, take it away, Esmeralda.
Thanks. Can you hear me? Yes? All right. Cool. Love the thumbs up. Cool. So as she mentioned, hey everyone, I'm Esmeralda Martinez, and I'm here to talk to you about how to build a data-driven roadmap. And so before we get started, a bit about me. I grew up in LA, and then I went to NYU's business school in New York. Fun fact, I've always loved math, so like a crazy person, I took math electives for fun in college. So you can see why I would love working for a product analytics company like Indicative. So I ended up at Indicative a few years after college when we were just 10 people. And so I started as an SDR just to really get my foot in the door in tech. Being a data nerd, analytics was perfect for me. And over the next 5 years, I've worn many hats across sales, CS, marketing, and now product, which I love. Earlier this year, actually in January, Indicative was acquired by mParticle, which has been incredibly exciting. And so now I lead a group focused on data-driven decision-making, which includes Indicative's product analytics, as well as another recent acquisition focused on machine learning, which is on its own is super exciting. And then also marketing, orchestration, and automation. And so today we're going to be talking about data-driven decision-making in product roadmaps. And we'll also be talking about, so in terms of the agenda, we'll be talking about different types of product roadmaps, and then what is behavioral data and how you can get started from square one with behavioral data, and then how you can then actually use that data to perform product analytics and inform your roadmap. And so first, types of roadmaps. So there are many different types of roadmaps I'm sure you've all seen before. In my product journey, I've come across 4 core types of strategies that product teams lean on when building their roadmaps. So the first, which I'm sure all of you have seen, is the gut feeling roadmap. So this occurs when product leaders have kind of little directional signal. And it's I've especially seen it with early stage startups or business units that are still searching for product market fit and maybe don't actually have the data to help inform the roadmap. The next one is the feature request roadmap. So this is the most common I've seen and really occurs when your customers are dictating what your roadmap is. So this is common when, again, you're a small startup, you have a few large enterprise customers that are dictating the roadmap. And sometimes that's really critical for that startup's existence. The next one is the C-suite roadmap. So this is really when the founders are leaning heavily on product and directly influencing what goes into the roadmap. And though a founder may have early success, I haven't seen it scale or really work in the long term. So that brings us, oh, no, one more is competitor roadmap. So I think we've all succumbed to this at some point as well, especially when you're competing with an incumbent gorilla. And so while certain table stakes functionality that competitors have may be critical to build, they don't actually lead to innovation or differentiation. And so now that leads us to the data-driven roadmap, which is what we'll be talking about today. So I want to take a moment and emphasize that data-driven roadmaps are not a silver bullet. I am not saying only use data in your roadmap. But it is a very critical, important part of how you build a successful roadmap. And so a good roadmap is driven by numbers and by data, but gut and customer feedback and competitive differentiation are all valuable inputs that should be going into how you plan your product roadmap. And it's also important to note that a data-driven roadmap includes both quantitative and qualitative data. But today, for the purposes of this, we'll only be focusing on the quantitative aspect of it. So before we dive in, what informs your product roadmap the most today? So post yours in Slack. Is it gut? Is it competitors? Are you already data-driven? And so now we'll be talking about behavioral data. So we're starting from the beginning. In order to have a data-driven roadmap, you need behavioral data. And so what is behavioral data? Behavioral data is data that shows what your users are doing within your product. So what features are they engaging with? What marketing initiatives, email, push notification. And so users generate tons of behavioral data as they interact across your web and mobile apps, streaming devices, point of sale, push notifications, and so on, even call center. And so this data includes both the actions that they take as well as the context around the actions. And we'll dive into a bit more what that actually means in a moment. And so tracking, collecting, and most importantly, using this data to derive insights is a vital part of building those modern roadmaps and measuring the success then of each release. And so to analyze and then operationalize on this data, you need a tool, a product analytics solution like Indicative. And so product analytics makes it easier to turn that raw behavioral data that we just talked about into actionable insights that can be used to inform your roadmap. So answering questions around visualizing your customer journey, identifying points of friction in your product, discovering behaviors that lead to increasing acquisition, engagement, retention, reducing churn, and all of this without SQL or writing a line of code. And so to show you what data analytics platforms can do to you, here's a shameless plug on Indicative. Of course, I have to do it. So I believe that data drives success, but data is only valuable if you're able to use it. So the complexity of today's analytics platforms bring barriers to adoption for non-technical teams by requiring those technical skills in order to derive data-driven insights. So Indicative was created to address this challenge. So Indicative is designed for non-technical business users, so typically product, marketing, business analysts will use a platform like Indicative to ask and answer their own questions so that the data teams, the data analysts, data engineers can focus on more complex, high-value analysis like machine learning, predictive modeling, and so on. And Indicative also connects directly to where your data lives, so whether that's a CDP, your web, mobile app, or your data warehouse. So we were the first product analytics platform to actually connect directly to your data warehouse. So we have very flexible and easy to use integrations with Snowflake, BigQuery, S3, name your pick. And so a few of the problems we solve. So here are a few of the examples of customers that use Indicative to address some of the pain points that we talked about. So Indochino and Haven Life are two customers that use Indicative to marry data across different platforms. So if you're familiar with Indochino, they have brick and mortar stores, but you can make an appointment online. So we actually connect that online experience to someone actually going to a brick and mortar store and then ending up converting. Haven Life is a life insurance company. So they have to submit medical records, they have to sign documents that are not necessarily on their app, on their mobile website. And so they use Indicative to connect across that entire customer journey and really understand that holistic picture of their user behavior that can then help feed into what are they going to prioritize from a roadmap perspective. Last bit here is Prezi and LiveUp. So I've heard this actually, there's a booth, I've heard this a ton from people coming up to the booth around data teams are inundated with requests from the business users. There's more questions than there are people to actually answer those questions. And so they use Indicative to help those business teams ask and answer their own questions without having to only rely on the data teams. So then again, the data teams can now focus on more high value, complex analysis than how many users use the new feature or what's my conversion funnel to X. And so do your teams, post in Slack, do your teams regularly use behavioral data? Would love to know. So let's take a step back and talk about barriers to making data-driven decisions with tools like Indicative. So we've been having kind of an underlying assumption so far that you already have clean data, it's compliant, it's complete, you're tracking everything. I'm sure we've all heard garbage in, garbage out. And so it's important to keep in mind that when we're talking about data to inform roadmaps, false and incomplete data, incorrect data will lead to incorrect insights and harm roadmaps. So data fidelity is a problem everyone faces. The complexity of modern applications and data stacks create so many points of failure. You know, a common problem I've seen is someone renames an event and now everything downstream has failed. So not to mention that each node in your stack creates its own silo. So the more nodes, the exponentially greater chance of ensuing data chaos. So we looked at our own retention numbers of Indicative and used a proxy for retention of users that have good data versus bad data, or companies that have good data versus bad data. And we saw that by day 30 of using Indicative, retention was 2 times as good for those that had good data. And then by day 90, it was 3 times higher for those that have good data. So that just goes to show that, you know, just using a product analytics platform alone without focusing on data quality and data fidelity is not going to get the results that you want. So you need to start from the beginning and ensure that you have quality data for your end users. So how do we actually do that? There's 4 steps to that. So the first is, and this is the case for any initiative that you're doing, is determine your goals and use cases. What are you actually trying to achieve? What are you trying to learn? And so, for example, let's imagine there's an e-commerce business that sells pet products, you'll see that example in a moment, and offers a monthly subscription program. So this business has already achieved product market fit and has a healthy 7-figure ARR. They are now looking for ways to grow and capture more market share. So how could this business achieve growth? Perhaps they want to increase monthly subscriptions. Perhaps they want to increase their standalone products, their one-off products. Maybe it's more affiliate commissions. So the goal that you set will help determine what types of questions you want to ask of the data and will help you understand what data do I actually need to track to answer those questions in furtherance of the goals that I've set out. So one important reason to do this is you cannot track everything under the sun in the first implementation of tracking behavioral data. So it's important to hone in on what is most valuable to you and then begin there. And so for this example, our goal is to increase new subscriptions. So some types of questions that you may want to answer are, where do users drop off in the sign-up flow? What touch points are leading to conversion? What marketing channels and initiatives are driving the highest conversion rates, and so on. So as you can see, identifying what that goal is helps you determine those questions. And then the next part is, step 2 is identifying your data requirements. So we have a template. I'll post the link in the Slack channel afterwards. But essentially, the template includes the goals, objectives, KPIs, and then from there, you turn that into what actions, what events do I need to track in order to answer those questions? And then what context do I need to track along with every action? So for example, maybe you're interested in looking at what conversion by device type. So that tells you automatically, okay, I need to track my flow as well as device information. So I'm able to answer those questions. So if you don't have the data you need, then you're going to need to implement certain solutions. So there's a whole ecosystem of ways that you can track, collect that data that then feeds into a product analytics platform. So here you can see, is this the laser pointer? Yeah, that's so cool. Okay, so if you have a web and app, and then here are different CDPs that you can use to track that data, and they will ensure they have tools that They offer for schema management, for quality, for privacy, now with GDPR. And then that can feed into something like indicative, or it can feed into the data warehouse, which can then also feed into something like indicative. And then, of course, if there's third-party platforms, so HubSpot, your market automation platform, CRM, support center, there's ETL tools that can extract that data and then load into your data warehouse and then to something like indicative as well. So again, it's important to first understand what data points are critical, and then how are you going to actually track that data and get it ready for product analytics. So then step 3 is that tracking plan. So after you've identified what you need, then you need a tracking plan. And so there's 3 key components to having a successful tracking plan. So one is consistency. So consistent data is key. You have to ensure consistency in how you name events, the properties that you track, so that more people in your org can use it. And so what that really means is you need guidelines around how you're going to name your events, right? Common question or common issue I've seen is one team does camel case, another team does title case, so you'll get page view implemented in 5 different ways, which causes issues when you're actually trying to do that analysis. So having those guidelines will help the different teams actually have the independence to be able to track their own data for their respective product. Then usability. So difficult or confusing data drives down adoption. And so this is also don't track everything. Everything is not actually valuable, and it just leads to more confusion. So usability is really important. And then complexity. So when you have a data set that's well designed and complete to begin with, it becomes a lot less complicated to scale and to evolve it. So putting the time up front to make it easier and simpler to iterate on your tracking plan will allow you to unlock deeper insights and more advanced analysis over time. And so there are 2 types of event tracking. So there is explicit tracking and implicit tracking. So explicit is where you decide, I explicitly want to track in the code these specific events. Implicit are tools that automatically track everything. So it's codeless tracking. So I highly recommend explicit tracking. Implicit tracking initially sounds really great, but the common misconception is that implicit tracking means I don't actually need a data strategy or a tracking plan. I can just figure that out later. But what ends up happening is it's a free-for-all. So anyone can then go into the UI, create events, and that leads to really messy data. So whether you pick explicit or implicit tracking, you still need a tracking plan so that the data is usable by the end users. And so once you've decided on how you want to track the data and you have your tracking plan, actually to build your tracking plan, you need to identify the steps in the user journey. So again, if we think about the goal of increasing subscriptions, here are different actions. So there's email events, there's app events, the subscription events, some product engagement. And so identifying these core steps help to create what that tracking plan is, or what goes into that tracking plan. And then we need to contextualize those events. So I had talked about actions, and then I talked about the context or the metadata around those events. And so, for example, here we have the subscribe event. We have different event properties. So we want to understand if they subscribed, what plan did they subscribe to? What device did they use to convert? Was it desktop? Was it mobile? Was it an iPad? And so that leads us to those event property values. So these are all components that are in the Google Sheet that I'll share later, but they're all components that go into creating that tracking plan. And then lastly, after you have all the data you need to clean and organize the data by creating a unified data set. So this is specifically valuable for product analytics. So first, well, actually, a lot of these are valuable in general. Establishing a unified identification system. You need to know this user in Zendesk is the same as this user in the UI, which is the same as this user in your email. So you need a way to identify users across the different data sources to be able to map across that and have a holistic profile of a single user. You then need to synthesize different data sources. So you need to be able to map server-side data like order confirmations to client-side data like app clicks or actually clicking on that purchase order confirmation to third-party data like Zendesk or CRM data. Then you need to ensure consistency. So this is what we talked about before around camel case versus title case versus snake case. There needs to be a consistent method for tracking that data that all of the teams use. Also, one weird thing I've seen, make sure you use UTC to track. I've seen some companies not use UTC, which I think is crazy. Always use UTC, you can convert it later. And then also be purposeful with the timestamp that you use, because once you get up and running, it'll be very difficult to change. And so we typically recommend server-side timestamps because client-side timestamps can be manipulated and it can cause issues. But Snowplow actually has this really cool thing called derived timestamp. And so the derived timestamp takes into account the client and server-side timestamps and then fixes wonky timestamps, which I think is pretty cool. And so you can ensure data fidelity on your own, or you can use CDPs like mParticle that have tools that were specifically created to help ensure data fidelity. And so with a tool like mParticle, you'd be able to define schemas, validate data quality, and control data flows in real time with a few clicks. So with these tools, your technical resources can spend less time building and maintaining these third-party integrations, responding to an endless stream of data requests, and avoiding costly cleanup when bad data propagates across the data stack. And so lastly, step 4 is develop documentation. So again, our goal is for the business users to be able to ask and answer their own questions. They are not familiar with the data. They didn't work on implementing it. They didn't create the tracking plan. They just have the questions that they want to answer of it. And so this, oh, no, back. Okay, so here's an example of a data dictionary within Indicative. So you can see the event names are labeled nicely with title case. There's a description of what each event represents. Same with event properties. So having that data dictionary is critical for adoption of a tool so that business users understand what the heck is this event? What does it mean? What is the user doing? And so having that central data dictionary is really important. And so last section is, how do you use product analytics to inform your data roadmap or your product roadmap? And so here are the behavioral analysis tools that Indicative has. And so there's 4 key tools. So Journeys is great for discovery. So I'm starting from scratch. I don't understand yet what my customer journey is, and I want it to show me. And so, for example, what do people do after they sign up? So that's this one. So for example, it could be sign up and then automatically spits out what are people doing after. Or what is my journey to conversion? So to subscribe, for example. What do people do prior to subscribing? What is the most common path to subscribing? Then we have the multi-path funnel. So Indicative is actually the only product analytics or analytics platform that offers a multi-path funnel analysis. So while it's important to understand that linear flow like A, B, C, D, it's also important to understand the different paths that people take to conversion. So for example, you can measure the impact that performing or not performing a certain action has on conversion. For example, if people view the pricing page, are they more or less likely to sign up? If people engage with a certain feature, are they more or less likely to upgrade? Then we have segmentation. So segmentation is your basic time series-based analysis. How many people did X? How did that change over time? You can segment by certain properties, so by device, subscription plan, whatever it is that's most meaningful to you. And then lastly, we have cohort analysis. So cohort analysis is important to understand retention, engagement, activation. So how often are people coming back? When do they drop off? Is it after a day, a week, a month? And why are they coming back? And so let's start to dig into some analysis. So first, let's identify the most common paths that people take after opening the app. So here with the Journeys tool, we can see, no, I keep pressing the wrong button, open app, and then we can see most people open the app again, and they engage with pet cam. So pet cam is a webcam to watch your pet while you're away by this fictitious company. You cannot actually buy a real pet cam. And then they're also creating a profile after they open the app. So you're starting to discover, without having to do anything besides put in what you want to start with, what are people doing? How are they engaging with your product? So next, we want to understand, all right, I care about subscriptions. What do people do before subscribing? And so here, logical, people are opening the app. They are receiving an email, and they're clicking on an email. So that's interesting to me. That tells me that maybe emails are actually drivers of people subscribing. Now I want to understand what types of emails are they seeing before they subscribe. And so here with indicative, you can expand the event. Here we can expand by email campaign. So I can see people are receiving the newsletter before they're subscribing. So now that's giving me a better picture of what is that journey to subscribe it. I can go to my marketing team and work with them to maybe tailor the newsletter to highlight subscriptions. Maybe that style of communication is effective, and I can work with the team to figure out what is the best way to hone in on this and double down. So next is understanding behavioral flows in a funnel. So here we're looking at a basic subscription funnel, and we're seeing where are people dropping off. So here we can see the lower conversion rate is between create profile and subscribe, as you'd expect. And so you can start to get a picture of where people are dropping off in your funnel. And so let's dive a little deeper and see what's causing the drop-off. So here we can see that content has the highest conversion rate. So here you're able to sort your funnel by whatever it is that you're tracking that's important. Marketing channel in this case, where content has the highest conversion rate. So maybe that means I want to, again, work with the marketing team to continue and double down on the content. Because you can also see that the count is very low compared to paid and email. So that could tell me that we are not dedicating enough effort on content, although it is the highest converting channel. So now I want to look at it from a different view and look at the devices. So here we can see that iPhone clearly has the highest rate of conversion, desktop and Android. And so this is telling me that iPhone has, again, higher conversion rate than Android. So maybe I want to audit the Android UX and compare it to the iPhone to see what we can do to improve that experience on the Android. And so let's take a look again at the journeys and recall that we saw that PetCam was showing up in the journey after opening the app, in the journey to subscribe. And so let's see if it has an impact on subscriptions. So here we can see, using that multipath funnel, users that did not open the PetCam and then open the app converted at a rate of 20%. If we take a look at the path of users who did open the PetCam, I can see that increased to 54%. So again, fictitious data, but this is how you'd be able to measure the impact that performing or engaging with that open pet cam has on conversion. And so, I'm almost out of time, but basically you can slice and dice it any way you want and compare those conversion rates. And so let's go over to the insights. So you can then use these data insights to inform your roadmap. So for example, a few of the ones we went through are iPhone subscribers or have a higher conversion rate than Android. Let's take a look at the Android UX. We saw newsletters drive subscriptions. We saw pet cam usage increases subscriptions. So all of these data insights you can then aggregate and use to inform that product roadmap. And so to sum it up with some key takeaways, so one, dedicate time up front. Invest that time to have a solid data strategy so that your business users are able to get the most value from your data. Start with your goals and use cases. Don't try to, what is it called, boil the ocean. Don't try to do everything. Hone in on what's most important and start with that and phase it out. Use a phased approach. Form that central source of truth. And then keep the data modeling simple so that it's easy to understand by those end users. And then you can be data-driven in your roadmap. So thank you, everyone. I will be at the booth later if you have any questions. Feel free to contact me, find me on LinkedIn. And if you go to our website, you can actually, that data set that we went through, you can explore that on your own in Indicative. Build your own dashboards, and then we also have a free account so you can actually send your own data in there for free. And that's it. Thanks, everyone.